And now I am honored to introduce our keynote speaker. Matthew Lash, JD, serves as Deputy Director with the CDER for Drug Evaluation and Research's Office of Compliance. In this role, Matt helps lead the office's talented team in its efforts to protect the public health through effective risk-based enforcement actions and the promotion of voluntary compliance. Matt joined CDER in 2023 from the Department of Justice's Consumer Protection Branch, where he served for 13 years as a trial attorney and assistance director. He represented the United States in criminal and civil cases implicating the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act and other statutes impacting consumers. Please, let us welcome Matthew Lash.
Good morning, and thank you for the introduction. My name is Matt Lash. I'm the Deputy Director of CDER's Office of Compliance, and I'm honored to present the keynote today. I want to thank all of you for taking part in this conference, which speaks to the importance of our DRLS work. Quite simply, accurate registration and listing data is essential to public health, and we'll share some examples today that underscore just that. Before we discuss the importance of the data, I just want to share a little bit about CDER's Office of Compliance. We're charged with the oversight of the Vital Drug Registration and Listing Program, but we're also charged with monitoring clinical trial oversight, drug manufacturing requirements, imports, recalls, and the integrity of the drug supply chain. In addition, we protect against counterfeit drugs, ensure labeling compliance, and take actions against health fraud, including prescription drugs, over-the-counter drugs, and compounded drugs. Quite simply, it's a massive mission. And I do want to share our mission statement with you. Ultimately, what anchors the CDER Office of Compliance is protecting patients and consumers. To be effective in fulfilling our mission, we have to uphold high standards for ourselves and for those we regulate. This means finding efficient and effective solutions and acting with dedication and determination, even in complex and challenging situations. And accurate data is essential to patient safety. The data that you submit is really integral to our public health efforts. For example, planning for drug facility inspections to ensure drugs are manufactured in compliance with the law. Data in the Drug Registration and Listing System, also known as DRLS, is extremely important to FDA's work reviewing imported products from abroad. Data submitted by an importer is checked against our system, and when it doesn't match, FDA can request additional information that can help stop potentially harmful products from entering the United States. We also use this data to track reports of adverse events and assign it to a specific drug for follow-up. In addition, this information enables consumers and healthcare providers to have access to information that can help them make decisions. DailyMed, the FDA Drug Label Repository, the NDC Directory, the Drug Establishment Current Registration Site. Your work is a critical piece in a complex public health framework. It helps protect and inform experts and the public, and we ask that you do everything that you can to submit accurate and complete information, because incorrect information can negatively impact our efforts and put patients at risk. We take this seriously, as you'll hear today, and we hold companies accountable for their data when it's not accurate, complete, or timely. I want to talk a little bit about the numbers. There are over 148,000 drugs currently listed with the FDA. As you can see from this pie chart, over-the-counter drugs have a slight majority at 42%. But that's followed closely by drugs covered by application, for example, an NDA or ANDA, that makes up 41%. And active pharmaceutical ingredients or bulk ingredients comprise about 10%. And there are more than 10,500 establishments currently registered with FDA. They're making the listed products. Owners or operators of drug manufacturing establishments are required to register with the FDA. Now, the majority of registered establishments are in the United States, as you see here, 56% approximately. However, that means that 44% are manufactured in registrations in foreign countries. The top 5 countries overall are the United States, India, China, Germany, and Canada. So we really span the globe, and it requires a massive effort. Let me talk a little bit about our compliance activities. We're working continually to improve the data quality found in the drug registration and listing system. We issue registration reminders to firms, we inactivate outdated firm registrations, product listings, and labeler codes, and we issue deficiency letters when necessary. And as you can see from this slide, just to give you a sense of the scope of our work, in fiscal year 2024, so far, almost 20,000 drug listings were inactivated due to either not being certified as active or associated with an unregistered manufacturing establishment. We have also inactivated 208 unused labeler codes and issued 141 deficiency letters to firms for inaccurate or incomplete registration and listing. So we've been busy. And I noted before that we also hold companies accountable if they fail to fulfill their obligations under the law, because there's a strong need for data quality and integrity maintained through validation and monitoring the DRLS system to facilitate compliance. And this slide is an example of that kind of action. We issue warning letters when we determine that a firm has submitted contradictory information between the labeling and the electronic files. And you can see from this excerpt that not fulfilling listing obligations is a prohibited act under the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, and we do share these letters publicly. However, our primary goal remains voluntary compliance. Trainings and conferences such as this are vital to helping us clearly communicate our expectations to you. And that's so you can understand what you need to do to stay in compliance. There are going to be many opportunities today for Q&A, and I encourage you to ask questions and take advantage of this opportunity to talk with our compliance officers. They're exceptional at what they do, and they're here today to engage with you. I also want to share with you another concrete example of how FDA has used DRLS data to stop dangerous conduct and have a positive impact on public health. In the LGM case referenced in this slide, registration data was a prominent feature. We identified instances where a U.S. company was submitting false information. We ultimately pursued this case through the Department of Justice, and the result was a consent decree of permanent injunction to prevent further violations of the law. Specifically, this case involved an importer and distributor of active pharmaceutical ingredient, or API. They were used by the company's customers to manufacture and, in some instances, compound finished drug products. Our concern was that the firm registered foreign suppliers with FDA without the supplier's knowledge and authorization and used inaccurate information, including providing incorrect supplier contact information. The firm was also importing from vendors that they had already disqualified. Another red flag was that the company's finance department oversaw relationships and transactions with API suppliers rather than doing that through the quality department. Now the company is under a consent decree. That means that their compliance with the law is under close and ongoing scrutiny, overseen by a federal court. DRLS data has also been integral to our recent compliance and regulatory initiatives across the spectrum. For instance, deaths associated with eye products manufactured under conditions in violation of the law, serious and permanent injury associated with unapproved mole remover and skincare products, and illegally marketed products intended to be used to treat a skin condition in children. We used DRLS data to identify reports of unexpected injuries with these products, and then we acted to stop the associated violations of the law. DRLS information can help our investigation when patients, particularly vulnerable patients such as children and the elderly, have been harmed. Now, with all that in mind, I did want to emphasize that we have some great workshop topics that are on tap, and I've listed a few here. I hope that you all will take advantage. Lastly, I want to quickly flag an update. CDER Direct has been renamed FDA Direct. And FDA Direct includes both CDER Direct for drug submissions and Cosmetic Direct for cosmetic product submissions. After cosmetics manufacturers were required to register with FDA and list all their products under the Modernization of Cosmetics Registration Act of 2022, CDER Direct was revised to provide a free and supported option for cosmetics registration and listing submissions to FDA. Cosmetics Direct, now a part of FDA Direct, was implemented in December of 2023, and it enables the cosmetics industry to meet their registration and listing requirements under the law. Firms can manage both drug and cosmetic submissions in one place, and users can create separate or combined accounts for drug and cosmetic submissions. I want to close by providing you with some key contact information, and I want to thank you for your time and attention. We have a great program planned, and it's really been my pleasure to share with you some background about the Office of Compliance and the import of our DRLS data and why this work and your commitment to providing this crucial data is so important. So I thank you, and I hope that you will enjoy the program.
Right. Thank you again, Captain Stoddard and Matthew Lash, for the welcome and opening remarks. And now it is time for us to start our dive into today's sessions. It is my pleasure to introduce our first set of presenters who will be speaking on the subject of registering your drug manufacturing establishment using CDER Direct. We will be hearing from Reggie Samuel, Technical Information Specialist, followed by Jose Cabrera, Technical Information Specialist, and then Dr. Tasneem Hussain, Consumer Safety Officer, all from the Drug Registration and Listing Branch of the Division of Labeling, Registration, and Unapproved Drugs in the Office of Unapproved Drugs and Labeling Compliance within FDA's Center for Drug Evaluation and Research. So now please join me in giving a warm welcome to our first presenter, Reggie Samuel.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Reggie Samuel, and I'm a Technical Information Specialist in the Drug Registration and Listing Branch. Today, it's my privilege to be able to give you a demo in CDER Direct on how to submit an establishment registration. A few learning objectives to keep in mind for today is we'll learn how to determine who registers and when, describe the various document types associated with establishment registration, and then to get into the meat of it, we'll create and submit an establishment registration, a registration renewal, and a deregistration. The next few slides regarding who must register and when will be gone through more detail in Tasneem's presentation in just a couple of sessions. But I just want to mention here at a very high level, who must register is any establishment that manufactures, repackages, and relabels drugs for distribution in the United States. There are certain exemptions that are included under 21 CFR 207.13, and Yogesh will be covering some of those exemptions in his presentation. When to register, again at a high level, it's domestic establishments should register no later than 5 calendar days after they begin their manufacturing process of the human drug product. And those that are foreign establishment should register prior to their importation of the drug product into the United States. When to renew and update, Tasneem will go into much more detail, but registration renewal should be submitted between October 1 and December 31 in order for that establishment or establishments to be current through the following calendar year. But if there are certain updates that have to be provided, such as an updated name or address, or your facility closes down, those updates should be provided within 30 days of the change. You don't have to wait until October 1 and December 31 to submit any changes to your establishment registration. Even if that's something like an updated business operation at your facility, that can be submitted at any time during the year. So what are the establishment registration document types? Well, there are 4 document types associated with establishment registration. The first is establishment registration, and that's the document type you would use when you initially register your establishment or establishments, and it's the one you would use if there updates to your establishment registration you want to submit to the FDA. The second is a no change notification. And just as the name kind of indicates, this document type is to basically say to the FDA, hey, nothing that has changed from none of the information has changed from what I submitted in my prior establishment registration. And it's kind of a simplified SPL document that you can submit. Now, you can also just choose to submit a new version of an establishment registration that has no changes in it as well. Both are acceptable. The third document type is an establishment deregistration. This is a document type that's used if your establishment is no longer, or all the establishments in your SPL document are no longer doing a manufacturing process on human drug product. The fourth is kind of a version of that deregistration. The out of business notification is simply a way of saying that all the establishments in my establishment registration are out of business. It's not just that we're no longer handling human drug product, we're completely out of business. So that's what that document type indicates. So let's get into what we've all been waiting for, which is the actual demo in CDER Direct to be able to submit this establishment registration information. Here's the login page, and we're not going to go through the login process. We're going to go jump right into the demo in CDER Direct for establishment registration. All right, now that we've logged into our CDER Direct account, we'll now be brought to our landing page. If this is the first time you've logged into your CDER Direct account after creating it, you won't have any submissions here. For the sake of time, I've made some sample submissions for us to be able to look at instead of you watching me type all the information in. So that's why I have submissions that appear here. You won't. And the other thing to keep in mind is even if your firm has been registered as an establishment previously through some other means, maybe through the ESG or a U.S. agent's CDER Direct account, the only submissions that will appear within your CDER Direct account is the ones that were created within your CDER Direct account. It won't simply populate submissions submitted through a different portal. So please keep that in mind. We get that question quite a bit. I had registered in 2020. How come I don't see that submission here? Well, that's because it wasn't created within this particular CDER Direct account. So let's just keep that in mind. But let's go back to what we're talking about before, and that's registering our establishment for the first time. And to do that, we're going to click on Establishment Registration. Then we're going to click on Create New /Upload File. Then create a new registration using a blank form and continue. Now we're going to get this screen, which is our Establishment Registration SPL. The first field we're going to have to fill in is to tell the system what is the document type of this establishment registration. For any updates or for a new registration, you're going to select Establishment Registration. The next 4 fields will be filled in for you, so you don't have to enter any information there. After that, we have all these boxes we need to fill in now. Any field name that has a dotted underline beneath it in CDER Direct contains, if you click on it, will provide to you help text. And that help text basically tells you a little more information about that particular field and the information we're seeking for you to enter. So if I clicked on registrant name, I get some help text here. If I clicked on registrant DUNS, it'll tell me the kind of DUNS number, how I should enter it without hyphens for this particular registrant. For the sake of time, I've already filled in an establishment registration. So close your eyes for just a brief moment, pretend I'm typing all this information in, and because I'm so fast and efficient, I've been doing this job for a long time, let's just assume that now when you open your eyes, all of the information I've somehow entered so quickly. So here in the registrant details, I need to provide the registrant information and the registrant contact information. I've entered that information detail. One thing to keep in mind here, we get this question every so often. The registrant should have a DUNS number, but the contact address for the registrant doesn't have to exactly match the address that's in the Dun & Bradstreet database for this DUNS number. And this is different compared to how we validate establishment address. So after I've provided the establishment address information, registrant contact information, and I want to enter establishment information, I'm going to go ahead and click on Add Establishment. And now I'll come to this screen that contains a few more boxes to fill in. Don't feel daunted. This is all information you'll know and be able to enter in quite quickly. I'm going to enter the establishment name for this particular establishment that I want to register and the DUNS number associated with this establishment. Then I'll select the country in which this particular establishment has, let's just put something else here, then in which this establishment has is located, and then the address and the city and the state. Now, one thing we want to make sure as we're entering in this information regarding the establishment address is that it exactly matches the record that is associated with this DUNS number. So in Dun & Bradstreet, this DUNS number would have a establishment name and establishment address associated with it. Please ensure that when you enter this information into CDER Direct, the establishment name and establishment address exactly matches what's entered, what is recorded in the DUNS record for this DUNS number. That'll help ensure that your submission doesn't experience a lot of the errors that many people find themselves experiencing when submitting establishment registration. The establishment FEI will be blank for now. This number is assigned by the FDA District Monitor, and it's assigned up to 90 days after we receive your establishment registration. However, usually if after about 30 days, you can go, and that's after 30 days after you've successfully submitted your establishment registration. If you still haven't received an email regarding your FEI, you can go to the FEI search portal. The link is here if you click on the field name for FEI and find out what is the FEI number associated with your particular establishment. And I'll come back to this when we talk about updating the establishment registration. Then I'll enter all the information here regarding my particular establishment, the contact information. If it's the same as my registrant contact information, you got this cool little box over here that I can click, and it makes life a little easier for me by bringing over the information that I had entered for my contact, so I don't need to retype it. So here it is, that information. And then finally, I need to provide a business operation for this establishment. And in this case, this firm location is manufacturing human OTC drug products produced under a monograph and human prescription drug products. I can click Save, which simply takes me back to this screen, say I'm done. But let's say I had multiple business operations. I could click Save and then click Add Business Operation again, then select what business operation I want, click Save again. But a little shortcut for you to know is, let's say I'm at this place where I'm first selecting my business operation and I have multiple business operations to select. I can click the qualifier associated with my business operation, and then I can click on Save and Add. So I don't need to, it saves me an extra click. So now I can go here and put the other business operation that I perform here, which is a relabeling. Say what I am relabeling. Another thing I should point out, even when you click relabel, some firms get confused because it still says manufactures human OTC or human prescription drug product. Hey, even if I select pack, it still says manufacturer, but I'm not manufacturing, I'm only packing it. According to the FDA, when we talk about packing and repacking or labeling and relabeling, those are considered manufacturing activities. That's why the qualifiers say manufacture. So just keep that in mind. That being said, if your firm is solely a private label distributor, that is not what label means. Here, label is referring to firms that are physically affixing labeling to a drug product. If your firm is solely a private label distributor, in other words, your firm has another contract manufacturer who's manufacturing and packaging the product, and all that happens is that manufacturer is also putting your firm's name and label on it, under which the drug product is being distributed, that would make your firm a private label distributor. My private label distributor business is not involved in the manufacturing process. In that case, I should not register my location, my private label distributor location, as a establishment. And that's one thing to keep in mind when it comes to establishment registration. This word here, label, is referring to physically affixing labels to drug products. It's not referring to private label distributors. So now that I've picked the particular business operations that I want, that I'm doing at this location, I can save them, and then I'll click on Save Establishment. Now, click on Save Establishment here. Now, for the sake of time, I've created other establishments within this establishment registration. You'd be wondering, how can you do that? Don't you need to submit multiple separate establishment registrations for each establishment location? And the answer to that question is no. You can submit, you can register multiple establishments within one establishment registration if they are all fall within your ownership. So if I have 5 facilities in the world or 3 facilities around the world, I don't need to submit 3 different establishment registrations. I can create one establishment registration and simply add multiple establishments to that particular registration. In this case, I did. So here I have another one that's located in India. And I had entered this information, again, for the sake of time, pretend I just clicked on Add Establishment instead of Edit. And I have this particular establishment located in Chennai, India, and I've provided the information. Now, what ends up happening if I do select an establishment address with a country that is outside the United States? CDER Direct will then pull up 2 other sections that don't appear if the establishment country is United States. So if it's outside of the United States, you're going to get these 2 other boxes that ask for U.S. agent and importer information. Now, the U.S. agent information is what I would enter here. But my company has a location in the United States and overseas. As such, I can enter my U.S. location as the U.S. agent for this foreign establishment that I have. I don't need to hire another U.S. agent if I'm choosing to handle all of the information regarding my foreign establishments myself. So here I put in the information of the U.S. agent, which in this case is the same company with the U.S. location. Your agent has to have a DUNS number. Make sure that's there. And then I can also add the importer information. Who are the folks that will be importing my particular product in the United States? And you can have multiple importers, similar to business operation. If you click on Add Importer, you can enter information for a particular importer. Click on Save and Add, and continue to add. If you had 6, 7, 8 different importers, you can include them all here. Once you're done, you'll click on Save Establishment. Now I'm ready to submit my SPL, but I have all these other buttons to press, Reg. What do they mean? Well, let's go through them one by one from right to left. Return would basically say, hey, I want to exit out of this. And if I click on that, it'll say, are you sure you want to do this? Because if you do, you won't be saving the information you entered. You're like, oh, no, I don't want to do that. Click Cancel. Delete is exactly what it looks like. It's going to delete all this information. You won't be able to go back to it at all. Save and validate. Now, let's stop and consider this one. Save and validate will save what I'm doing, and in the process, submit. I shouldn't use that word. And in the process, send this particular submission for the automated validation. Now, this is different than it being received by the FDA. What this does is it kind of goes through a quicker process to see if I've made any errors in my submission. And if I have, it'll come back and let me know within a few minutes, hey, you have an error in that your DUNS address doesn't match the record and doesn't match the DUNS record. Please update your address. Or if it does pass validation, it'll say, hey, your submission's ready to now submit. So keep that in mind. This doesn't actually send it to the FDA. It's just to validate the SPL. Then you have Save as Draft. This is the one you would select if in the middle of trying to fill out all of the information, your dog starts barking and he's just incessant that he must go outside. And so you have to stop what you're doing. You don't want to lose your work. You can click on Save as Draft. It'll save it in your CDER Direct account. You can close out of the browser. When you come back and log into your CDER Direct account, you can pick up where you left off. What we want to do in this case is click on Submit SPL. Submit SPL will send it through the validation process and also submit it to the FDA if it passes validation. And so that's the one I want to select. If I click on Submit SPL, it'll now give me the status of awaiting acceptance. Awaiting acceptance. And then the other, what I want, hopefully it will do, and it'll take about maybe 10 minutes or so to go through the validation process, the complete validation process. And once it's completed, hopefully I'll get back this status that says submission accepted. If it does, that means now that the submission has been received by the FDA and the establishments listed in my establishment registration are registered. Okay, so I've shifted to this other screen to help us see what to do when after we've submitted our establishment registration and it's now been accepted, and how do I now re-register in the following year, or if I need to make updates to my registration at any time during the year, how do I make those updates to my establishment registration? Well, it's quite simple. Once you've logged back into your CDER Direct account and you have that submission, you've identified the submission you want to update, that has the status of submission accepted, you'll just click on submission accepted. And then what you're going to do to be able to edit this particular establishment registration, whether that's to submit an update because the contact has changed, a business operation has changed, or you're re-registering, or you want to deregister. In any of those cases, you're going to access the file that you want to update, click on submission accepted, then click on create new version. Clicking on create new version allows the form to now be updated. And that's what we want to be able to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on create new version. So now you can see I've kind of unlocked the SPL. What ends up happening is the system automatically increases the version number by 1. And then now I can update the information that I would like to update. That could be that, hey, this person's no longer the contact for the registrant. I can go here and I can edit this person and put in the new contact information, the new email address, etc. I can also, let's say I have a new establishment that I have brought online in a different part of the world. I can at this point click on add establishment, add that new establishment that's under my ownership, and then submit the SPL to register that particular establishment. So now I would have 4 listed establishments in this establishment registration. And then the other thing I can do, so that's how we update information. Now, if I want to re-register again between October 1st and December 31st, same process, access that previously accepted SPL file, click on create new version. If there's nothing to change, you just kind of look, make sure everything is good and correct. I always suggest this to firms so you don't miss out on any correspondence from our office. Make sure the email addresses are correct, the phone numbers are correct, and then just click submit SPL and you're done. It would literally take you about 2 clicks once you're logged into CDER Direct to re-register your establishment. Submission accepted, create new version, submit SPL. I guess that's 3 clicks. And you would be done in that case. The other thing to know that I want to show you is how to deregister an establishment here. And there are 2 ways. One is I could change the document type to establishment deregistration. Now, if I do that, what that means is all of these establishments that I have in this particular SPL would be deregistered. Now, if that's what you want to do and you're deregistering all of the establishments listed in this registration, that's perfectly fine. You click on establishment registration and then change the document type to deregistered. But if click it and then submit SPL. But let's say I just want to deregister one less than all of the establishments in my establishment registration. What I would do in that case, let's say I have this particular establishment that I need to deregister. I don't want to click on changing the document type to deregistration because that will deregister all of my establishments. If I just want to deregister one of them, I will click on the edit tool next to the establishment I want to deregister and then click on delete establishment. Deleting the establishment from the registration now leaves me with just the two establishments I want to continue to keep registered. But the one that I've deleted, once I submit it, our system will detect that, hey, this particular establishment registration associated with this set ID used to have 3 establishments associated with it. Now it only has 2. And we will be able to then detect and say, oh, that's the one that they chose to deregister or had gone out of business, that particular establishment. So keep that in mind of how to deregister. Sometimes firms accidentally change the document type to establishment deregistration when they only wanted to delete less than all, deregister less than all of the establishments included in their registration. So if we just want to deregister 1 or 2 of the 3 that we have, we're just going to remove them from the establishment registration, keep the document type as establishment registration, and then submit SPL. Now in this last screen, I'm going to show you how to import a file, an establishment registration SPL file, into CDER Direct. So when would you use this? A case for this would be, let's say you had a consultant you would use before, or a different company had submitted for you in registering your establishment registration, but you now want to handle it on your own. And without having to re-enter all of the information manually one by one, you can get the XML file from your previous consultant or whoever it submitted for on your behalf previously and save that file to your computer. And then how do you upload it into CDER Direct? Well, what you do is you would click on Establishment Registration, click on Create New/Upload File, click on the radio button to import an existing establishment registration, and then continue. Click in the dialog box here and select the file from your computer that you want to now upload. It will be a zip file that contains the XML of the establishment registration. So I'll just double click this and then click Upload. Once I do that, the information that I had from my previous submission will be automatically uploaded into CDER Direct. It'll automatically increase the version number by 1 to the next integer, and then keep all of the previous information you submitted intact. So now it's in your CDER Direct account, but it hasn't been submitted. So what you want to do is update any contact information you need to, any business operations in the establishment, and then as you did before, you can submit to SPL, or let's say it's not time to submit, it's not October 1st and you're still properly registered and no information has changed, you can at this point just click on Save as Draft. And what that'll do is just save it. Now it's saved within your CDER Direct account for you to be able to access when the re-registration period comes up in October 1st and December 31st. All right, so now we're down towards the end here. Here's a challenge question for you to test your knowledge regarding all the things we just talked about. The question is, who should not register as a drug establishment? A firm that is solely a private label distributor. B, a manufacturer. C, a relabeler. or D, contract manufacturers? The correct answer is A. Firm that is solely a private label distributor should not register itself as a drug establishment. Remember, drug establishment is one that is performing some sort of manufacturing process, which includes packing and labeling, but it's not someone who's simply distributing the product under their own name and label. Challenge question number 2. During what period can I update my establishment registration? A. January 1 to January 31. B. October 1 to December 31. C. June 1 to June 30. Or D. Any time of the year. When can you update your establishment registration? The correct answer is D. Any time of the year. When you have an update, as soon as it happens, go ahead and submit it. Just take your 5 minutes out of the day and submit that update in your establishment registration. All right, let's summarize what we learned here today. Probably the most important point of all is to register and update your establishment registration on time. As shown in today's demonstration, it's quite easy to do once you know the buttons to click and the information required for your updates. A few simple clicks can allow you to get your registration done well in time for the registration renewal, or if any updates need to be made on your registration. Always remember that you can manage multiple establishment locations on one establishment registration. You don't need to submit a separate establishment registration for each of your establishment locations. They can be managed on one establishment registration, SPL. Always make sure that your DUNS information is up to date with Dun & Bradstreet. And that would be the establishment name and the establishment address. If there's any change in the name or address, you wouldn't submit an establishment registration first. First, go to Dun & Bradstreet, update that information in their database, and then come and submit your registration update for your establishment registration. Finally, if your firm is solely a private label distributor, you would not register as a drug establishment via establishment registration, although there are listing requirements, drug listing requirements still for the private label distributor. They would not register as a drug establishment, as that's intended for those that are performing some manufacturing activity. Here are a few links to resources that would be helpful to you. Of course, the CFR for the registration and listing, the DCER's website, which shows the current registrations in the FDA database, and of course, FDA Direct, the way that you can submit SPL documents to the FDA. Thank you for sticking with me throughout this presentation. I hope it was helpful to you, and thank you once again for submitting your establishment registrations on time.
Hello everyone, welcome to the SBIA workshop. My name is Jose Cabrera. I'm a technical information specialist in the Division of Labeling, Registration, and Unapproved Drugs, Office of Unapproved Drugs and Labeling Compliance. Today, I am giving you a presentation on establishment registration highlights. Please keep in mind that at the end of this presentation, there will be several challenge questions for you to answer. Feel free to take notes throughout the presentation to help you with your memory. Let's look at our learning objectives for this presentation. First, identify establishment business operations. Next, provide requirements for the U.S. agents. Next, we want to describe the role of importers. And finally, understand mergers and acquisitions. Let's take a look at establishment business operations. First, business operations describe the manufacturing activities performed within the establishment, whereas if you are a packer, repacker, labeler, relabeler, those are all different activities if they are performed in your facility that need to be annotated in the establishment SPL. Of course, facilities that are performing multiple operations should be listing all of their operations in that SPL. Why is this so important? We use this information to access statutory fees, for inspection planning and drug volume reporting. Here is a list of current business operations that you would use for your establishment registration SPL. As you can see down at the bottom, we have pack, we have relabel, repack. We also have third-party logistics provider, United States agent, wholesale drug distributor. These are some of the more common business operations that we do see. We also have analysis, API manufacturer, import, label, and manufacturer. Please take some time to familiarize yourself with this list, and also we'll have a link provided at the end of the presentation where you can find a list of these business operations for yourself. Business operations on the SPL page include business operations for all submissions, 503B, DSCSA, which is the Drug Supply Chain Security Act. An SIP foreign seller can only be located in Canada. Here are the requirements for a U.S. agent. Now, this is also outlined in 21 CFR 207, which I have in the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and read this slide so that way we can have a firm understanding as we get into the other requirements for a U.S. agent in the next slides. Any foreign establishment engaged in the manufacture, preparation, propagation, compounding, or processing of a drug imported into the United States must identify a United States agent for that establishment. The United States agent is responsible for responding to the FDA questions concerning drugs that are offered for import, reviewing, disseminating, routing, and responding to all communications from FDA. In other words, when FDA has a question on a drug that's offered for import, we reach out to the U.S. agent for clarification or for more information. FDA is providing data to the U.S. agent equivalent to providing data to the foreign establishment. If we are communicating with the U.S. agent, we are communicating with the foreign establishment. One thing to note of great importance, and we have had issues with this in the past, the United States agent must reside or maintain a place of business in the United States, and it may not be a mailbox, it may not be an answering machine or service, or other place where a person acting as the United States agent is not physically present. So what happens if you have an unauthorized U.S. agent that is listed in an establishment SPL? Well, it does happen, unfortunately. So unauthorized inclusion of a U.S. agent in a foreign establishment registration may cause the FDA's inactivation of the registration record. To combat this, we ask U.S. agents to check Deckers periodically to look for unauthorized use. Let's talk about drug importers. Imported drugs must meet FDA standards for quality, safety, and effectiveness. FDA will verify compliance with the following requirements as applicable: registration and listing, drug application, drug labeling, and drug current good manufacturing practices. More information on drug importers will be available in links at the end of this presentation. For drug importers, for the purposes of this part, a person in the United States that is an owner, consignee, or recipient at the time of entry of a foreign establishment's drug or an animal feed bearing or containing a new animal drug that is imported into the United States. That is per 21 CFR 207.1. Again, we'll have more information on the CFRs and links to that at the end of this presentation. FDA verifies that the declared manufacturer is registered and the product is listed. FDA verifies the foreign manufacturer has identified the declared importer in their registration. If the information does not match, the FDA may need to gather additional information. detain the product, or refuse entry of that product. Now let's talk about mergers and acquisitions. Companies can merge, establishments can be acquired. In the terms of an establishment registration, any establishment moving from one registrant to another should be removed from the initial SPL and moved to acquiring company's registration SPL. DUNS and FEI may remain the same or change. The decision will be made by Dun & Bradstreet and FDA's ORA, Office of Regulatory Affairs. They will also report the transfer to D&B and find out if the DUNS will remain the same prior to the submission. They will also leave the FEI field for the transferring establishment blank once the updated registration SPL is submitted, and ORA will make that determination if the same FEI should be used. Okay, so now we're going to go and cover our challenge questions. So we have about 3 questions that we're going to cover, all multiple choice. So hopefully you took notes and you remembered some of the things that we talked about in this presentation, which will be able to help you answer these questions effectively. The first question, the business operation must reflect the functions the facility performs for A, inspection planning, B, assess statutory fees, C, drug volume reporting, D, all of the above. So question number 1, the business operation must reflect the functions the facility performs for D, all of the above. If you guessed D, you are correct. The business operation must reflect the functions the facility performs for inspection planning, assessing statutory fees, and drug volume reporting. So answer D is correct, all of the above. Congratulations. Let's move on to challenge question number 2. If my establishment only repacks and relabels one product, do I need to list both operations? A, no. Only use the business operation that sells the most product. B, list the business operation with the lowest fee. C, list all business operations the facility performs. D, email eDRLS and explain what you manufacture. D is my favorite, but let's see what everybody else is going to answer. So, challenge question number 2. Let's see what the majority of us got. If my establishment only repacks and relabels one product, do I need to list both operations? C, list all business operations the facility performs. I want to emphasize that you don't need to email eDRLS and explain what you manufacture. Listing all business operations in the establishment SPL is what we want. Congratulations to everybody who got this one right. So here's challenge question number 3, and this is our final challenge question. Where can I read the requirements to become a U.S. agent? Is it A, 21 CFR 207, 69B, B, 21 CFR 207.96B, C, 21 CFR 209.67C, D, CFRs are only suggestions. I'll give you a hint, it is not D, so this should make this question a little bit easier. And the answer for challenge question number 3, where can I read the requirements to become a U.S. agent? A, 21 CFR 207.69B. Again, CFRs are only suggestions was not a viable answer, nor should it ever be a viable answer. So to summarize this presentation, we covered a tremendous amount of information. We talked about the use of correct business operations to identify establishments, foreign establishments that require U.S. agents, verifying compliance with FDA before importing drugs into the U.S. market. Here is a link of all the different resources that we covered here today. I'll make sure to make this available to everyone here in attendance, and that way you have a reference guide where you can go back to these links and look at the information provided. Again, my name is Jose Cabrera. Technical Information Specialist with the Division of Labeling, Registration, and Unapproved Drugs in the Office of Unapproved Drugs and Labeling Compliance. Thank you again.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us. My name is Tasneem Hussain, and in this presentation, we'll be talking about complying with establishment registration requirements. At the end of this presentation, you should be able to describe the establishment registration requirements under 21 CFR 207. You should be able to identify some common registration-related issues. You should be able to explain the compliance program and the important points in the deficiency letter we sent to the firms, and then be able to describe some effects of non-compliance. So before we can talk about compliance with respect to registration data, we have to briefly go over the requirements themselves. Registration requirements are found under Section 510 of the FD&C Act and easier to find and codified under 21 CFR Part 207, Subpart B. So in the next few slides, we'll go over a few sections for who must register, what info must be included, when to initially register, and when to update. So starting with 207.17, this has who must register. This means all domestic and foreign firms who perform any manufacturing activity. Private label distributors do not perform any manufacturing activity, so they are not required to register, and therefore they should not register, while contract manufacturers do manufacture, and thus they must register. Under 207.21 is when to submit the initial information. Domestic manufacturers must submit no later than 5 calendar days after beginning to manufacture, and foreign manufacturers must do the registration before importation. 207.25 has what information must be submitted. It includes identifying information such as the name or owner or operator of each establishment, the name of the establishment, the address, phone number, contact information, registration information, the unique facility identifier, the business operations, names and address of official contact for the establishment. So also under 207.25, foreign manufacturers must include the name, address, telephone number, and email for their U.S. agent, and for each importer in the United States, and information about each person who imports or offers to import. And FDA communicates with foreign establishments via the U.S. agent. Thus, having an updated and current information is vital for communication. 207.29 has the requirements for updating the registration information. So you may be aware already that between October 1 to December 31 annually, the registration must be renewed. And then if there's a closing or selling of an establishment, if any changes have been made to the establishment name or address, or any change made to the official contact or U.S. agent information, this information must also be sent to FDA within 30 days of a change. If there are no changes, a no change notification may be used to update the requirements, and all the changes that have been made since the last annual update must be reflected in the new information. If no information has been updated, then they can certify that no changes have occurred. So where is the registration data found? Drug Establishment Current Registration Site, or DECRS. This is the FDA's online registration database, and if a firm registers properly with FDA, the data will be found here. If the data is not found in the site, it means that the firm has deregistered, or the registration has expired, or the data may have been inactivated because of a compliance case. Here we have some common issues that we encounter with registration data. Some facilities register when they should not register, such as, for example, PLDs that we talked about earlier. Sometimes there are DUNS number issues, and sometimes there are missing FEI numbers. Some firms will enter an incomplete or incorrect business operations. Many times we see unauthorized U.S. agents who are submitting data to FDA. This can lead to many issues. Having outdated contact registrant information is very problematic. Obviously, having incorrect contact information means it's hard for FDA to reach your firm, and the firm will not get timely communications. And then FDA, this may lead FDA to compliance actions against your firm. So it's very important to have updated contact information. So now we can get into the compliance part and talk about our compliance program. The program started in 2015 with the mission to protect and promote public health by striving to achieve accuracy and integrity of the establishment registration and drug listing data. We do this in several phases. So we review the data for any kind of inaccuracies or errors. And if we find errors, we send a deficiency letter to inform the firm and give them 30 days to make the corrections and resubmit. If they don't comply with that simple steps, then we have to move forward with something harder, which is, removing the data from the DRLB site. And if the firm still does not address the issue, then we may inactivate the registration data. And then we may also go forward with registration warning letters to the firm. Let's discuss a little bit more about the compliance program and the deficiency letter that's important and that we send to the firm. These are some highlights of the deficiency letter that we want to point out. In the first part of the letter, usually there is a statement of the deficiency in the first paragraph. And then the next point to note is that the firm is given 30 days for making corrections. And then another point that's very important is that non-delivery of the letter does not stop the process, meaning that if the firm does not receive our letter, it does not relieve the firm from the registration requirements. And it's not just that. It's an actual requirement under 207.29A3. The registrants must update any changes to contact information within 30 calendar days of the change. So again, please read all the instructions on the right steps to follow for resubmitting and updating your files. And so why is registration data important? It's important because it helps FDA have an inventory of all drug manufacturers who are producing drugs for sale in the U.S. It aids in the inspection program. It assists with drug shortage cases. It's important for post-market surveillance and adverse event reports, and it's also required for drug import and export. And now we can talk about some effects of non-compliance. So having outdated contact information of the registrant and establishment, this will only cause delays because the firm will not receive timely FDA communications and notifications. If there are any DUNS issues, this can create validation errors and then will stop the submission from going through. Incorrect or incomplete data can lead to compliance cases. Unresolved compliance cases if the registration data has not been fixed, then the data will be removed from DRLBs. Here are a few more effects of non-compliance that may be a little more serious. So if you use an incorrect manufacturer or if you use an expired establishment as the manufacturer in a drug listing submission, then that listing is misbranded under Section 5020 of the FDA Act for including such unregistered or expired establishments. And further, if this drug is introduced in the U.S. commercial distribution, this is a prohibited act under Section 301A of the FDA Act. Please note that drugs which appear to be misbranded may be refused entry at a U.S. port. And if an establishment warning letter is issued, this can stay in a permanent record against the firm. So we have come to our first challenge question. Under which subpart of 207 are registration requirements found? We'll give you a few moments to think of the answer. The correct answer is subpart B. Subpart B has the registration requirements. Our challenge question number 2. All of the following are true about establishment registration requirements except A. Establishment registration must be updated annually between October 1 and December 31. B. Foreign establishments must register initially within 5 days of beginning to manufacture. C. Foreign manufacturers must include a U.S. agent and important information. D. In no changes notification SBL may be used to renew the registration information. And here we'll give you another few seconds to think of the answer. So statement B is false. Domestic establishments must register initially within 5 days of beginning to manufacture. Foreign establishments have to register before their drugs are offered for import into the United States. And our final challenge question number 3. What are some negative effects of not complying with registration requirements? A. Firm may receive a deficiency letter. B. Data may be removed from the DRLS site. C. Inclusion of incorrect manufacturer may lead to misbranding charges for drug. D. All of the above. And we'll give you a few moments to think of the answer. The correct answer is D. All of these are possible negative effects of non-compliance. So as a summary of what we talked about, please review and follow the registration requirements under 207. We have some links coming up for you. Our compliance program helps to keep submitted data accurate and complete. An establishment registration must remain current as it can affect listing data too. And failing to comply can lead to some unwanted negative effects. So here's a closing thought. Compliance with registration requirements can be easy if you follow the regulations and submit your information correctly the first time. And here are the resources. The Electronic Code of Federal Regulations 21 CFR Part 207, the Drug Establishment Current Registration Site, and the Electronic Registration Listing Compliance Program. Thank you for your time and attendance today, and if you have any questions, please let us know.
All right, another thank you to our first round of presenters for all the wonderful information they have shared. If you have questions for them, don't fret. The team will be back for Q&A scheduled a bit later this morning. For the time being, though, we will be taking a short break to resume at 10:25 Eastern Time. So see you back then. Welcome back from the break. Hope everyone was able to take some time to refresh and came back ready for our next set of exciting sessions. It is now my pleasure to introduce our next set of presenters who will be speaking on the subject of requesting a labeler code from FDA. We will be hearing from Pui Huber, Technical Information Specialist, Lori Simons, Technical Information Specialist, and Dr. Vikas Arora, Consumer Safety Officer, again, all from the Drug Registration and Listing Branch of the Division of Labeling Registration and Unapproved Drugs in the Office of Unapproved Drugs and Labeling Compliance within FDA's Center for Drug Evaluation and Research. So please join me in welcoming our next presenter, Pui Huber.
Thank you for the introduction. My presentation focuses on the labeler code request process, starting with some key details and then moving on to a live demonstration in CDER Direct. By the end of this presentation, you'll be able to understand the purpose of labeler codes, submit a labeler code request using CDER Direct, complete a labeler code assignment, update a contact or address details, and inactivate a labeler code if needed. Many of you are already familiar with this, so this will be a quick review. The labeler code is the first set of numbers in the National Drug Code, or NDC. The NDC itself is divided into 3 segments. The first segment, the labeler code, identifies the company and is assigned by the FDA. The remaining 2 segments, the product code and package code, are assigned by the labeler. The purpose of requesting a labeler code is to list drugs, whether prescription or over-the-counter, that are manufactured or distributed in the United States. A labeler code request must be submitted when first introducing a product into commercial distribution. So this needs to be done. Labeler code must be requested and completed within 5 days of the product going into distribution. If your company does not have any drugs that need to be listed with the FDA, you don't need to apply for a labeler code. Since labeler codes that don't have any drugs listed will automatically be inactivated after 24 months. Additionally, any labeler code not assigned by the FDA or obtained through false information may be inactivated without prior notice. And finally, firms have the option to inactivate their FDA-assigned labeler code if they choose to do so. There are 2 key labeler code document types to be aware of. The first one is NDC labeler code request, and this document is used for requesting a labeler code, completing the labeler code assignment process, reactivating a labeler code, and updating any labeler information or details. The second is the NDC labeler code inactivation, and this document is used to inactivate a labeler code that is going out of business or as a result of a company mergers and acquisitions. Now we're going to walk through the labeler code request process, including how to complete or update a labeler code live. So if you have your laptops with you, please go to the link on the screen. It's direct.fda.gov, and this will take you to the FDA Direct login page where we'll begin our demonstration. Once you log in, the CDER Direct homepage will show you all the submissions that you've sent or saved as drafts by default. Here you'll also see some basic data elements if you have multiple users in your account. The last modified user, document type, root, set, status. To create a new labeler code request under all submissions, you're gonna click on NDC labeler code request SBL. After clicking the link, you'll see a page with all the submissions that you've created, drafted, or submitted in the past. Since we are requesting a new labeler code, we'll click on Create New -Upload File. And you'll notice there's a pop-up here. This is just a reminder to let you know that it's preferable to wait until you have a product to list. And it also provides you with some processing time and guidance on how to reactivate an automatically inactivated labeler code. So click OK. And then select Create New NDC Labeler Code Request using a blank form and select Continue. And so for this presentation, we are going to request a new labeler code. So our document type here will be NDC Labeler Code Request. Next is the set ID. The set ID is what the FDA uses to link submissions for any SPL over time. The root ID is also known as document ID. It's unique for each submission. And so for new submissions, the version number defaults to 1. And since this is a new form, the header details can be left as it is. We'll move on to labeler details. Now moving on to labeler details, enter the labeler name, the DUNS, and make sure that the labeler code field is blank. Since we're requesting a labeler code, this field must be left blank. Enter the rest of the labeler code information, the labeler contact details, and labeler contact address. The additional labeler details are optional, but as you can see here, including them will expedite your request. If you opt not to complete this information here, an email will be sent to the contact address to verify the physical address, DUNS, and business operations. So if the firm requesting the labeler code is located at a different address, you can enter the information here. If it's the same as the contact address, you can just check this box here to populate the same information without having to retype it. Next, we'll select the business operation of the labeler. Next, select the appropriate business operation for the labeler. For instance, if the business operation is manufacturer, you will provide the qualifier that tells us, provides us with information on what's being manufactured, whether it's human prescription drug or over-the-counter or both. You have the option to select multiple qualifiers. You can save and add additional business operations as well. At this point, you can either save your draft and return later, or if you think the submission is ready, we'll click on Submit SPL. So for this demo, we'll go ahead and submit the SPL. And so now we're back at the submission screen. You'll notice our submission says awaiting acceptance. An email will be sent to the contact email associated with the account. If there are any changes, if there are any validation errors, you will get notified. Or if the status changes to submission accepted, you'll get notified as well, as shown here. So once your labeler code is assigned, this is an example of the assignment letter. Once you receive your labeler code and review the letter, you'll see that you are required to confirm the labeler code. This confirmation SBL is the official record of the labeler code in our system. So it's a necessary step before you can list any products. So to confirm our labeler code, let's log back into FDA Direct and complete the process. To confirm your labeler code with the assigned number and complete the process, we are logged back into CDER Direct, and we are going to select the previously accepted SPL that was used to request that labeler code. So make sure that it's the same set ID, the same labeler DUNS, same labeler name that was used for creating the labeler code request. So under status, we are going to select on this submission accepted labeler code request. Next, we are going to click on create new version, and that will enable the fields. And once we do that, we will enter the labeler code, assigned labeler code number. And that's it. Once we are done, we will simply go back and submit our product listing. Submit our labeler code request, and that is going to complete our labeler code request process, and you'll be ready to submit your product listing. There are several reasons why a labeler code request might be rejected. The first one, the requesting firm is not required to register and list. This can happen if the firm does not meet the criteria for FDA registration and listing, which is necessary for obtaining a labeler code. The product they manufacture or distribute is not a drug. Labeler codes are specifically for drug products. So if the product is not classified as a drug, the request will be rejected. the requesting firm is already assigned a labeler code. So if the firm has already been assigned a labeler code, requesting another one could lead to rejection, as each firm is generally issued a single labeler code. Industry-initiated labeler code inactivation occurs when a labeler code is no longer needed. This can happen due to several reasons. One, if a company goes out of business or there are changes in operations and the labeler code may no longer be required. In the case of mergers or acquisitions, companies may consolidate labeler codes, and that could lead to inactivating one of the labeler codes. If a drug under development fails to receive FDA approval, the associated labeler code may no longer be necessary. These are examples of just situations that could typically lead the company to voluntarily inactivate the labeler code. To inactivate a labeler code, let's log back into CDER Direct. Once you're logged in and you are in the NDC labeler code request page, make sure you select the labeler name or DUNS number that you want to inactivate. Next, click on Create New Version. And change the document type from NDC labeler code request to NDC labeler code inactivation. And finally, click on Submit SBL and your inactivation will be completed. To reactivate a labeler code that was previously industry-initiated inactivation that you've inactivated, go back into that submission, the NDC labeler code inactivation with the same set ID. All you have to do is change the document type to NDC labeler code request again, and ensure that you have the labeler code you want to reactivate. So if the labeler code that was inactivate was 00000, enter that labeler code number in the field and submit SBL, and that will reactivate the previously inactivated labeler code. To wrap up, here are the key points to remember. A labeler code SBL should be submitted when your drugs are ready to be launched for US commercial distribution. Whether you need to complete the labeler code process, inactivate a labeler code, or update the labeler code assignment, always use the original set ID that was used to request the labeler code. Labeler codes without listed drug products are automatically inactivated after 24 months. And if you need to inactivate a labeler code manually from the industry, submit an NDC labeler code inactivation SBL. Now that we've covered the key points, let's test our understanding with a few challenge questions. Our first challenge question is, what happens if a labeler code does not have any products listed for 2 years? A, it will be automatically reactivated by the FDA. B, it will be permanently inactivated by the FDA. C, it will receive a notification 30 days prior to inactivation. Or D, it will be transferred to a different regulatory agency. And the answer is C, it will receive a notification 30 days prior to inactivation. A labeler code is a component of the National Drug Code, NDC, used to identify the manufacturer or distributor of a drug product. What does the labeler code represent in the NDC? A, the dosage form of the drug. B, the specific product formulation. C, the package size and type. Or D, the manufacturer or distributor of the drug. And the answer is D, the manufacturer or distributor of the drug. And finally, our last challenge question. Which of the following is a reason why a labeler code request might be rejected? A, the requesting firm is required to register and list. The product they manufacture or distribute is classified as a drug. The requesting firm is not required to register and list. Or D, the requesting firm has not been assigned a labeler code. And the answer is, I know you all got that right, it's C. The requesting firm is not required to register and list. If you have any questions or need further assistance, you can always reach us at the email provided here. It's eDRLS@fda.hhs.gov. We're here to help with any follow-up questions or clarifications you might need. Thank you.
Thanks for the great demo. Good morning. My name is Lori Simons, and I am a Technical Information Specialist in the Drug Registration and Listing Branch within OUDLC at FDA. Let's continue the discussion about labeler code requests. After participating in this session, attendees should be able to describe timing requirements to update labeler code information, provide steps to reactivate FDA-initiated labeler code inactivation, and describe labeler code update requirements for merger or acquisition cases. Let's begin with labeler code information updates. When should labeler code information be updated? The information related to a labeler code should be updated within 30 calendar days after any change. Changes include, but are not limited to, the physical address, email, and phone number. These updates must be made per Part 207 of Federal Regulations. FDA uses the labeler code information for official communication regarding the company's listings. Aside from your legal responsibility, it is in the best interest of your company to send updates to labeler code information to FDA as soon as possible, since FDA sends communications to labeler contacts for such topics as listing data deficiency, annual reminders, new agency initiatives and requirements, as well as data requests, updates, or clarifications. If you do not receive communications from FDA due to old or outdated information, it does not relieve you from fulfilling requirements listed in the communication. Because of this, FDA recommends that you review your contact information at least annually. Now that we've reviewed when to make updates, let's see what we remember. The challenge question says, labeler code information, including the name, physical address, email address, and other contact information must be updated within, is the answer A, within 90 days, B, within 30 days, C, within 60 days, or D, every June and December? Take a moment to consider which answer you think is correct. The answer is B, within 30 days. These updates must be made as listed in Part 207 of the Federal Regulations. Let's continue with labeler code inactivation. As we learned in the labeler code request demo presentation, labeler codes without any listed drugs will automatically be inactivated after 24 months. Please note, inactivation does not result in the loss of the labeler code. Labeler codes not assigned by FDA or obtained by providing false information to FDA may be inactivated without prior notice. Prior to FDA-initiated labeler code inactivation for labeler codes not used in any drug listings, an email will be sent to the contact email associated with the labeler code assignment. Labeler code inactivation will be initiated in 30 days from the date of the email. To avoid inactivation, either list a product associated with the labeler code or provide a valid reason for not having any products listed. This is an example of a labeler code verification email message. The message will be sent from CDER Electronic Drug Registration and Listing and will contain information stating that no drug product listings were found in the database for the labeler code referenced in the email. If you receive the inactivation notification email, please respond within 30 days by emailing us at eDRLS@fda.hhs.gov. State the reason for your continued need for the labeler code, or if you no longer require the labeler code because you don't manufacture or distribute drugs for U.S. commercial distribution, state this in your response. Please keep in mind timely and accurate responses are essential to maintain an active labeler code. This is an example of a labeler code inactivation notification email. If there was no response to the verification notification, then your labeler code will be inactivated. If you have a drug or drugs that you are about to enter into U.S. commercial distribution, please provide us with details for each drug in an email. The requested information is necessary for us to determine if the labeler code should be reactivated. Now that we've reviewed labeler code inactivation, let's see what we remember. The challenge question says, what happens if a labeler code does not have any products listed for 2 years? Is the answer A, it will be automatically reactivated by the FDA, B, it will be permanently inactivated by the FDA, C, it will receive a notification 30 days prior to inactivation, or D, it will be transferred to a different regulatory agency. Take a moment to consider which answer you think is correct. And the answer is C. It will receive a notification 30 days prior to inactivation. Now let's move to our last topic, mergers and acquisitions. These can differ for each company based on business decisions and contractual agreements, and every case is unique. Companies can merge or be acquired. Products can be acquired with or without a merger. A business decision is made at the time of a merger or acquisition to transfer or keep all or part of products. The current labeler code or NDCs can be acquired, and such mergers or acquisitions can require updates to the registration, labeler code, and listing SPLs. For example, Company A and Company B are merging and they are changing their name to Company C. Company C acquires the entire drug catalog for Company A and Company B. In addition, Company C has decided to keep Company A's labeler code. There are a few steps that should be taken. Here is what Company C should do. They must update Company A's labeler code and registration SPLs if applicable. They must update Company A's listing with the new labeler name, Company C. Next, they must delist all of Company B's drugs under Company B's labeler code and relist under the new Company C's labeler code and labeler name. They must also inactivate Company B's labeler code, and if Companies A, B, and C are registered with FDA, update the registration SPLs. In this example, Company A acquires the human prescription line from Company B, and Company B continues manufacturing human OTC drugs. The labeler code cannot be transferred. Acquired drugs must be delisted under Company B's labeler code, and acquired drugs must be listed under Company A's labeler code. Now that we've reviewed some examples of mergers and acquisitions, let's see what we remember. The challenge question says, mergers and acquisitions can require updates to, is the answer A, registration SPL, B, labeler code SPL, C, listing SPL, or D, any of the above. Take a moment to consider which answer you think is correct. The answer is D, any of the above. For more information about the topics covered today, here is the link for the FDA's Electronic Drug Registration and Listing Instructions website, as well as the list of NDC and NHRIC labeler codes which have already been electronically submitted. In summary, a firm has 30 calendar days to make updates. Labeler codes without listed drugs are automatically inactivated after 24 months. Companies can transfer labeler codes and all or part of drug products. And lastly, please remember to follow all necessary post-merger steps. Any questions will be answered in our live Q&A panel. And one final thought, with the resources for labeler codes and mergers and acquisition cases, you can more confidently provide updates. Thank you for listening.
I'd like to thank my colleague for their presentation. My name is Vikas Arora, and I'm a Consumer Safety Officer with the Drug Registration and Listing Branch within the Office of Compliance. And today I'm going to be talking about complying with labeler code request requirements. Here are the learning objectives for this presentation. It is to provide a list of required data when a labeler code is requested from the FDA, identify some common labeler code related issues that we come across, and explain in what situations a labeler code may get inactivated immediately. So let's get started. What is a labeler code? Labeler code is of course the first segment of the NDC code. It is a numeric 4 or 5 characters. Under 21 CFR 207.33b, the length will increase to 6 digits once we run out of 5-digit labeler codes. And as my colleague mentioned in a previous presentation, this is assigned by FDA. So labeler code requirements were passed in Section 510 of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act and codified under 21 CFR 207.33c, which states the required information needed for a labeler code for the labeler code request, as well as the update requirements. In what time frame does this required information need to be updated when there is a change? So who will be assigned a labeler code? You saw in the previous presentations how to submit a labeler code request to the FDA, and I'll repeat here that each person who engages in manufacturing, repackaging, relabeling, or private label distribution of a drug product subject to drug listing requirements must apply for an NDC labeler code because they must list, or the drug distributed under their name and label must be listed with the FDA. It is imperative that the correct and complete information is submitted at the time of request so the FDA can make a proper determination for assignment. Only complete information that is submitted for a manufacturer or a private label distributor of a drug will result in the assignment of a labeler code. So what information is required for a labeler code request? This is stated again under 207.33 C1 and includes a name, physical address, and email address of the person for whom the NDC labeler code is requested. It includes a type of activities or business operations that the labeler code is engaged in, and the type of drug to which the NDC labeler code will be applied. So how do we assess our labeler code data? Well, our compliance program was started back in 2015 and ensures data integrity and focuses on the requirements of 510 of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act and 21 CFR 207. If there are any issues with the labeler code data, we will issue a deficiency letter. And if the deficiency letter is not responded to in a timely fashion, we can proceed with additional action such as inactivation of the labeler code. So what are things that we assess as a part of labeler code compliance? We check to see that the labeler data is submitted accurately and completely. We check to see that any updates to the required information are submitted within 30 calendar days after any change. And we check to make sure that the labeler codes are assigned by FDA. So what are common labeler code issues that we come across? We come across contact information that is outdated. We often see that when a company goes out of business, They delist their drugs, but they do not inactivate their labeler code. And we see that the labeler code name is not updated in all the drug listing SPLs after it has been updated in the labeler code SPL. Please note that updating the labeler code information in the labeler code request SPL does not automatically populate the change to all of the listing SPLs under that labeler code. This can be complicated because the drug labeling still refers to the old name. If the labeling does not include the old name, all listing SPLs should be updated if the labeler name changes to reflect the new one. If the drug labeling includes the old name, the labeler name in the drug listing should be updated as soon as new labeling with the new labeler name is printed and included in the drug listing SPL. So when is your labeler code submission not in compliance? If the business operations are not complete or accurately described, if the type of drug is not provided correctly, for example, if the drug is prescription but you present it as an OTC drug, and if the proper updates to the required information are not submitted within 30 days of change. For example, updates to the business operation and updates to the labeler code contact information. So what do you do if you have received a deficiency letter? Provide all the required updates within 30 days of receipt of the letter. If no response is received on our end, the assigned labeler code may get inactivated. And an inactivated labeler code cannot be used for drug listing submissions going forward. So what are some situations where a labeler code is instantly inactivated? For one, if we come across a labeler code that was never assigned by FDA, we will inactivate that labeler code immediately. Similarly, if a labeler code was assigned by FDA but based on false information that was presented to us, that labeler code will also be inactivated. And lastly, once a notification about inactivation is provided to the labeler point of contact given, we will proceed with the instant inactivation of the labeler code. So now let's go over some challenge questions. Challenge question number 1. A labeler code request SPL is only submitted once when you're requesting a new labeler code. A, true, B, false. And the answer is false. Although the first time the SPL is created and submitted is typically when you request a labeler code, there are other reasons to submit a labeler code request SPL. For example, if you had an old labeler code submitted via paper forms prior to 2009, and now you start manufacturing drugs again and need to register your labeler code electronically. Additionally, each labeler code SPL must go through reviews and revisions must be made if any changes are required from previously submitted data. Although not required as a best practice, we recommend reviewing your labeler code request SPLs at least annually during the registration renewal and the drug listing certification period. Challenge question number 2. Which data is required for labeler code request submissions to FDA? A, labeler email address. B, labeler business operation. C, manufacturing establishment. Or D, only A and B? And the answer is D. Labeler email address and labeler business operations are two of the requirements for labeler code request submissions. And lastly, challenge question number 3. Currently, how many digits is a labeler code? A, 5, B, 4 or 5, C, 4, 5 or 6, or D, none of the above? The answer is B, 4 or 5. Currently, we have 4 or 5 digit labeler codes. Once we run out of these labeler codes, we will move to 6-digit labeler codes. In summary, please submit accurate and complete information to FDA when you request a labeler code and follow all update requirements to avoid a compliance case and further actions such as inactivation of your labeler code. Thank you for listening to this presentation, and we look forward to your questions in the Q&A session.
Great. Thank you again to our presenters for their spectacular presentations. We will now begin our question and answer panel to include all presenters from this morning's sessions. If you haven't had a chance to enter your question into the Q&A chat pod, please do so now. We'll answer as many questions as time allows. And it looks like we've already had quite a few questions roll in. We'll start with some questions that came in addressed to Reggie Samuel. First question, Reggie, how can you retrieve submissions that were submitted using a different account?
Great question. If you had a different account and this is an account you still would like to get the submissions from, there are two things you can do. If you do have the person that maybe submitted it before and they can provide you with those XML SPL files, you can then upload it into CDER Direct. But if you're in a situation where you just don't have the files or the person that used to do it for you is no longer accessible, you can send us an email and we can provide you with the zip file, the previously submitted establishment registration zip file, which you can upload into CDER Direct and manage from there. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that response. Another question for you, Reggie. Do I understand correctly from your demonstration that a company needs more than one DUNS number?
So in the case of DUNS numbers, you want to think of DUNS numbers as something that is site specific. So if you have a company that has 5 different locations, each of those locations should be assigned, obtain a DUNS number from Dun & Bradstreet. And so yes, if you're a company that has multiple locations, each location will have one DUNS number assigned to it. Thank you.
Right. Thanks again for the clarification. We have some more questions that came in addressed to Reggie Samuel. When submitting the first establishment registration with a blank FEI, does one need to resubmit when the FEI number is obtained?
Great question. When you register as an establishment for the first time, as I mentioned in my presentation, you won't have an FEI. And I'll make a clarification to the previous question I saw that came in. The DUNS number will need to be obtained from Dun & Bradstreet, and they will assign a DUNS number to the establishment prior to your registration. Once you then submit your registration, your establishment registration, after about 90 days, you will receive the FEI number. Once you receive it, you will need to go back into your establishment registration, enter the FEI number, and submit it. It will not automatically populate into your establishment registration and appear on the DSER's website. For the FEI number to appear on the DSER's website, you will need to update your establishment registration with the assigned FEI number. Thank you.
Thanks again. Another question for you. Are other establishment registration tools such as ESG still effective? Which one should a new registrant use and why?
Keep in mind that CDER Direct is just another avenue for you to be able to easily submit SPL documents to CDER. ESG, or if you used Xforms, or if you have a third-party program in which you create the XML documents, you can continue to use those if you'd like. CDER Direct is just another way for you a free option for you to be able to submit establishment registration, labor code requests, and drug listing files to the FDA. So it's entirely up to you which one you would like to choose. If you do choose CDER Direct, you can do that without having to use the other tools for these specific SPL document types.
Right. Thank you again, Reggie. We'll address some questions now that came in for Jose Cabrera. Jose, generally, how much is the workload for the U.S. agent on an annual basis?
That's a very good question, and thank you for that. So, in general, the workload for the US agent is really going to be dependent on the drug establishment that they represent.
Some U.S. agents may represent one or two drug establishments with only a few requirements to list drugs. And there may be some U.S. agents who have a larger workload of 50 different drug establishments that they are responsible for. So this is really going to be dependent on the actual U.S. agent's workload, depending on the actual establishments that they're working with. Just to keep in mind, your U.S. agent is a representative of your establishment. So this should be somebody who you are able to communicate with within the establishment, someone that you actually know, and preferably someone that you can reach in times of emergencies when we may have a question on your establishment registration, an SPL, drug listing, a labeler code, etc. Thank you.
Thank you for that response as well. I have another question coming in here addressed to Jose Cabrera. Where can we get definitions of business operations? For example, what is a packager that removes primary packaged product from secondary package and places it in a new secondary package or tertiary package? Is this a repacker, labeler, relabeler, or packer?
Thank you again for that question. So we do get a lot of these questions that come in on what is a packager, what is a relabeler. So rather than going through all of these different requirements or the definitions of these, I can provide a link to the CFR where we have a list of all of the definitions defined and written out. And then for those individuals who have further questions, you can always feel free to email us on those actual definitions, and I'll provide that link into our chat here in a moment. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that response. And now we have a question that came in for Dr. Tasneem Hussain. Does a QC laboratory need to register?
Hey, thank you for that question. Yes, generally, and if quality control activities involve testing or determining if product is within specification or for final products, and if this is generally part of the manufacturing process. So yes, QC labs must register their establishment. Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much for that response. Another question that came in for you, Dr. Hussain. If the update was made in the middle of the year, can a no change be made during the certification window of October to December?
Yes, thank you for that question. Also, if an update is made in the middle of the year, can a no change be made during October? This is generally a no change certification SPL is generally used when there have been no changes made to the data. So if there are any changes made any time of the year, generally you're required to update, in June and December every year. But any changes that have been made can always be made anytime during the year. So you could just send an update using just updating an SPL and resubmitting it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that response. We now have some questions that came in for Pui Huber. Um, let's see. First question, if the labeler code was inactivated, do you need to request a new one or ask the FDA to activate the inactivated code?
Thank you for bringing it up. So yes, you can reactivate an inactivated labeler code. If the inactivation was industry initiated, you can reactivate the labeler code by submitting a request using the assigned code and the original set ID. However, if the inactivation was initiated by the FDA, firms will have to email us at eDRLS@fda.hhs.gov for assistance to reactivate an inactivation by the FDA. Thank you.
Thank you for that response. And another question for you related on labeler code inactivation. is it that all NDC codes needs to be no longer marketed, meaning delisted? Could you please clarify that?
Yes, another great question. Thank you. Yes, so for a labeler code to be inactivated, all NDCs associated with that labeler code must be discontinued, since they're no longer in the market. So the proper procedure involves 3 steps. The first one would be to discontinue the drug products associated with that labeler code, since the products are no longer in the market. The second step would be to deregister the establishment with the FDA to let us know that the facility is no longer involved in manufacturing or distributing. And the third step would be to inactivate the labeler code. And so, this will ensure that the labeler code and the products that are listed are no longer active in our external databases. Thank you.
Thank you again. Another question for you, Pui, that came in. If the manufacturer is about to run out of NDCs, can the manufacturer get assigned a new labeler code while still having the old labeler code?
Another great question and an important one. So thank you again for bringing this up. So yes, a manufacturer can be assigned a new labeler code if they are about to run out of product codes under their current labeler code. The manufacturer should also apply for a new labeler code only once they've exhausted or are close to exhausting all the available NDCs under the existing labeler code. Also, there are no regulations that prohibit a firm from having multiple labeler codes, especially with the scenario where they run out of NDCs, as long as they accurately report to the FDA and maintain, a complete and correct information with all their products, registration and listing. That way, the products are properly tracked and compliance is maintained. Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying that as well. Another question for you, Dr. Arora. Can you please clarify who's responsible for requesting the labeler code? If my company, say ABC Pharma, has a product, but we're using establishment ZBA to manufacture the finished drug product, is it ABC Pharma's responsibility to request the labeler code, or is it ZBA's responsibility?
Thank you for that question. So a PLD and CMO are both required to obtain a labeler code, as they're both intended to for distribution into U.S. commercial distribution. So it is while they're both required to obtain a labeler code, it is, however, the responsibility of the PLD's listing as well as the CMO's listing belongs to the CMO. However, many times the CMO does use a PLD as their authorized agent for their listings. Thank you.
Thank you again for that response. And now we'll go to some questions that came in for Reggie Samuel once again. Reggie, I'm unclear about what is meant if a private label company should not register as an establishment. I work for a private label company, and I was guided by the FDA to register as distributes drug products under own private label. Could you clarify that, please?
Yes, thanks, Nora. So we want to keep in mind a couple of words when we're talking about drug registration and listing. When you hear us use the words register, we're talking about establishment registration. We don't use the term registering a product. We use the term listing a product. So please keep in mind when we're talking about establishment registration, those are for firms, as mentioned in 21 CFR 207, that are performing that manufacturing activity. The business operation mentioned this question for distributes drug product under own private label is not a business operation that's valid in an establishment registration. That business operation is applicable to labeler code request SPLs. So a PLD would not register, and we use that word register, as an establishment, but there are listing requirements which would require obtaining a labeler code and listing drug products. So keep those two things separate and those terms separate. That way we'll be able to properly manage your private label distributor operation. Thank you.
Thank you again. Another question for you. For API manufacturers, do you select the qualifiers that may apply to the end users of your products? Are qualifiers required fields?
A great question. For specific business operations such as analysis and API manufacture, the business operation qualifier is not required. We understand that if you're an API manufacturer, you may not know the what the end user will be using the product for. And so in the validation procedure, if you select the business operation of analysis or API manufacturer, the operation qualifier is not a required field. Thank you.
Thank you again. Another question addressed to Reggie Samuel. Could you please talk about the capability for override when DUNS does not match?
Yes, the DUNS mismatch is a common error we receive that we see firms get in the establishment registration. There are some overridable errors. However, if the error is something in which the DUNS name, the establishment name, or the address doesn't match what's in the Dun & Bradstreet record, generally that is not an overridable error. What will need to occur is that your company will need to contact Dun & Bradstreet to ensure that the information in the DUNS record is accurate. And when you enter the information in CDER Direct, that it matches exactly what's in the DUNS record. Now, if there's some other ongoing issue for that everything matches, there's no characters that are different or special characters included, then it's possible that there could be a manual override granted. But generally, if there's an address or name mismatch because the DUNS record isn't updated, that will need to be updated first. Thank you.
Thank you again as well. One more question for you. Since a private label distributor is not meant to register their facility, does that distributor still need a labeler code for their CMO to list those private label drugs on behalf of the private label distributor on the NDC database?
Yes. When it comes to this, again, the PLD the private label distributor, does have listing requirements, as mentioned by Vikas. They need to obtain a labeler code that identifies the private label distributor, and then the products that are being distributed by that PLD need to be listed under that PLD's labeler code. Under the CFR, the listing responsibility does fall to the contract manufacturer to list the drug product under the PLD's labeler code and its own labeler code. However, if the PLD chooses to, they can list the drug product for themselves under their own labeler code. So we have specific questions about that. Feel free to email us, but please keep in mind that the PLD does need to obtain a labeler code and list a drug product, although they do not and should not, if they're solely a PLD, register as a drug establishment. Thank you for that question.
Thank you again for all the information you've shared. We now have a question that came in addressed to Jose Cabrera. How do we find a U.S. agent for our foreign manufacturer?
Thank you for that question. And we do get this question a lot that comes into our mailbox. So, in short, to locate a U.S. agent, it is the responsibility of the foreign manufacturer to locate one. We do not have a list or database of U.S. agents that are able to represent you. That responsibility falls back to the foreign establishment. The recommendation would be to conduct a internet search for U.S. agents in the United States that would be able to represent your establishment in helping you with your establishment registration or SPL documents that you need to send through CDER Direct. Thank you for that question.
And thank you for that response. We have another question for you. Is there a maximum number of establishments that you as a U.S. agent can represent?
Thank you for that question. So, no, there is no amount of, there's not a limit to what a U.S. agent can represent as far as drug establishments. It really would be dependent on that organization and how they represent those foreign establishments. One thing to keep in mind for foreign establishments who are looking for or employing a U.S. agent to represent them, to do their due diligence on that individual and to make sure that this individual is going to be able to conduct the work that they need them to do. For example, if they know they have about 25 to 30 listings per year that they want to have listed, ensure that the U.S. agent that they are communicating with is able to accomplish those in a timely manner. Thank you for that question.
Thank you again for your response. And now we have a question that came in for Lori Simons. What happens to a labeler code without any drug listed?
That is a great question. The labeler code would automatically be inactivated after 24 months if there aren't any drugs listed. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for clarifying that. One more question for you. How long do I have before my labeler code information must be updated?
Another great question. Labeler code information, including the name, physical address, email address, and any other contact info, must be updated within 30 days of that change. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much for that response as well. Now we have another question that came in for Pui Huber once again. Who should request the labeler code? Is it the PLD or the CMO on behalf of the PLD?
Thank you for that question. As Vikas and Reggie mentioned earlier too, the CMO has the legal responsibility to request the labeler code and list the product on behalf of the PLD. However, some PLDs do choose to request their own labeler code and list the products themselves, to manage their own NDCs. So if the PLD does not elect to list the product, the CMO must do so, using the PLD's labeler code and NDC. Thank you.
Thank you again for that response. And now a question that came in for Dr. Vikas Arora. Why are there 4 or 5 numbered codes? In which case is there a 4-digit code, and in which case a 5-digit code?
Thank you for that question. It just depends on what labeler code you were assigned by FDA. So the current NDC 10-digit formats are 442, 532, and 541. But just keep in mind with the 5-digit labeler codes, if you were assigned that, once you list in a format, you must stick to that format for any future products that you list. Thank you.
Thank you again for that response too. Now we have another question that came in for Reggie Samuel. Our FDA regulatory person left and has all the login information for FDA Direct. We cannot get into the site to change their contact information. What can we do?
Thanks, Nora. So if you have the situation where a former employee had all the login credentials for the CDER Direct account, we understand that happens quite often. You can contact, and the information is also there on the CDER Direct website. You can contact the CDER Direct help desk. That email address is cederdirect@fda.hhs.gov, and let them know your firm's DUNS number or some identifying information for the account, and they will help you recover that account so that you don't lose all of the SPL documents that are in that CDER Direct account you can no longer access. So contact the CDER Direct help desk for any account issues you have, and they'll be a great team to be able to help you obtain that information. Thank you.
Thank you again for all that information. Another question for you. Currently, we have the CDER Direct account, but as FDA changed the platform from CDER Direct to FDA Direct, do we have to create a new account for CDER Direct to perform site registration, or still can we use our current CDER Direct account for access?
Yes, with the new FDA Direct, the way you want to think about it is simply that everything is the same, but we're adding another component within the housing of what's in FDA Direct. So instead of just it being CDER Direct, FDA Direct contains two modules, that is Cosmetics Direct and CDER Direct. As such, all of your information is still the same. You don't need to create a new quote unquote FDA Direct account. Your CDER Direct account will still work, your credentials will still work, and all your information will still be there. So on the user's end, you shouldn't see anything different, except that there is another module for those that have to submit cosmetic information. So you shouldn't have any problem being able to continue to use your CDER Direct account as is. Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you for that as well. Another question addressed to you, Reggie Samuel. If an establishment name is changed, are all products listed for that facility automatically updated in the system, or do new SPLs need to be submitted for each product to update the establishment name after the establishment registration is updated?
Yes, good question. I'll answer a couple of questions also came in relationship to this, and that is, if your firm's establishment name is updated in the establishment registration, it does not flow through and propagate the other listings associated with this establishment. Therefore, you will need to access those product listings, each product listing, and update the establishment name in each product listing and submit that product listing update. It doesn't happen automatically. Similarly, if you have a establishment registration with multiple establishment names, different names, that's fine. There's a couple of questions I saw where firms are wondering if you need to have multiple establishment registrations simply because the name isn't exactly the same as the other establishment. The validation is not going to look for that. You can have a Reggie Samuel company, and you can have Nora company, and you can have Pui company, all in the same establishment registration as long as it's under that same ownership. So, and if you add that information, that only sticks to the establishment registration. It doesn't then flow through to the product listings associated with those establishments. You will need to access the product listings separately and update them appropriately. Thank you, Nora.
Right, thank you again, Reggie. Another question for you. When a company acquires a new establishment that has its own establishment registration with different name, is it required to keep them separate?
No, they don't need to keep them separate. They can use the same establishment registration regardless if the names are the same or different.
All right, thank you so much for that clarification as well. Now we have another question that came in for Jose Cabrera. How many U.S. agents can a firm have?
Thank you for that question. So From a drug listing perspective, it is recommended that you have at least one U.S. agent. We do not require you to have more than that. Having one U.S. agent is enough due to the fact that this individual will be dealing with a lot of your confidential drug listing information. So it's recommended to not have too many people having access to these types of SPLs with all of this information. So having one U.S. agent would be recommended from an eDRLS perspective. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that response. Another question for you, Jose. What does FDA mean by an unauthorized U.S. agent?
So this is a very good question that we do come about from time to time with a lot of our inquiries. So an unauthorized U.S. agent, typically what may happen is as a foreign drug establishment, you register your facility and you are preparing to have a drug listing. And you may find an individual to list as a U.S. agent. You would need to have this individual's consent in order to have them listed in your establishment registration. Once we contact this information and we ask them if they are in fact your U.S. agent for this establishment, and they say no, you have essentially used an U.S. agent and in an unauthorized manner. So we would then possibly open the case against your establishment for using this individual as a U.S. agent without having their consent. So we encourage you to not go online and you find a U.S. agent that you can use and you can take their information and put it into your establishment registration. Definitely you want to contact this individual or company and find out their process for having them become your U.S. agent and have that in writing, something that it can be provided to the FDA when asked. Thank you for that.
Thank you again for sharing that information as well. And now we have another question that came in for Dr. Vikas Arora. If a company is a CMO and manufactures drug product for a client, and the client has a separate packaging and labeling site, does the CMO need to have a labeler code?
Thank you for that question. As a client is also performing manufacturing activities, that is packaging and labeling, they will also need to obtain a labeler code and are subject to listing requirements under 21 CFR 207. Any and all manufacturing activities beginning at the API phase up until the finished dosage form phase are subject to registration and listing requirements. Thank you.
Okay, thank you again for that response. And so we have some more questions that came in for Reggie Samuel, very popular for this Q&A session. So Reggie, are warehouses that store finished drug products or API required to register the establishment? If yes, what operations would they choose if there is no analysis being performed of those materials?
Yeah, a few people had asked this question. So, and I think the person asking this question, you've kind of answered it yourself. We've tried to make it clear through the business operations. As you can see, there's not a warehouse business operation because in our definition in 21 CFR 207, they don't fit what we call an establishment. So in short, if a firm is only storing drug product, there's no handling of the drug product itself. As mentioned in this particular question, I want to be very clear that we're talking about simply storing drug product. There would not be a corresponding business operation. You'd be able to select an establishment registration because that is not a firm that's only storing drug product would not be able to register as an establishment. Now, there may be other requirements in FDA for drug storage of particular drug products that may fall under the wholesale drug distributor or third-party logistics. However, for our purposes, no. The answer is no, they would not register if you're solely storing drug product. Thank you.
Thank you again. Another question for you. If we have updated drug establishments in September, is it necessary to submit annual update again in October to December?
Yes, I saw quite a few of these questions come in, so thanks for asking that, Nora. Let's make this clear since this is coming up right now for all of you that are attending this workshop today. If you submit an establishment registration in September of this year or any month prior to October 1st of this calendar year, your registration is only current through 12/31 of this current calendar year. Therefore, you will need to re-register or renew your registration between October 1st and December 31st of this calendar year in order for your registration to be current through 12/31 or December 31 of the following calendar year. So please keep that in mind. If you submitted your establishment registration on September 30th of this year, it will only be current through December 31 of this year. You will need to go into CDER Direct and renew your registration by clicking on Create New, and then submit that file or submit a no change notification for your registration between October 1 and December 31 to be current through the following calendar year. Thank you.
Thank you again. And now we have a question that came in for Lori Simons. If a company A acquired company B along with their labeler code, can company A maintain both the labeler codes?
That is a great question. So yes, a merger or acquisition, as we mentioned before, is a reason why a company might be assigned more than one labeler code. So if the labeler code is transferred to company A as part of that merger, then the labeler code information would need to be updated in order to refer to the proper company after that merger. Thank you.
Thank you for that response as well. We have a question now for Dr. Tasneem Hussain. Do CMO foreign establishments and applicant holder both have to submit drug product listings separately?
Yes, thanks for that question. So as far as application holders, they're not performing any manufacturing activities. They're just the application holder. So in that case, they're not required to register or list. CMO, however, must register and must submit drug product listings for all their products that they manufacture. So basically, as been mentioned before, CMOs are ultimately responsible to make sure that there are two listing files submitted for each product that has been manufactured. So one must be under the CMO's name and NDC, and one must be under the PLD's, the private label distributor who's actually distributing the products in the PLD's name and NDC. So as we mentioned before earlier, also CMO is ultimately responsible, but the PLD may choose if they want to submit their own listing. So yes, two listings have to be submitted and the CMO is responsible, but an applicant holder who doesn't perform any activities, any manufacturing activities, are not required to register or list. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that response as well. Now we have a question back to Reggie Samuel. Could you please define repack and relabel? Does it include bundling two existing products into, for example, a twin pack? Does it include adding an existing product to a kit or holiday pack, or are these considered labeling?
Great question, and I'm going to try to do this concisely. And as mentioned before, if there are questions we don't get to and I can't necessarily answer it fully, please do send us an email to our email address so we can address your concerns. When it comes to repack and relabel, and label and pack and label, this is the way to think about it. For repack and relabel, these are the business operations you would use when your firm is taking another product and then putting your name and label on it and distributing that drug product. So for example, a repackager would be a firm that takes some product, puts it into its own packaging with its own labeling, and then is distributing that product under their own name and label, meaning their own labeler code. A repack or relabel would be when you're simply keeping something, already distributed drug product and simply changing the labeling to your labeling and distributing that drug product. PAC is the one you would use when you're being contracted to package a certain drug product into a carton or into a bottle, but it's not being distributed under your own name and label. You're being contracted to just do the packaging portion. Then you would select PAC. Similarly for label, if you're not distributing the drug product under your own label, you're a contract labeler, you would select label for when you're simply putting another person's label for them and returning it back to them. So those things can be a little confusing, and we understand that. We're here to help you whenever we can. But if you're actually assembling things together from the outset, that is more a manufacturing activity. It's not a repackaging. Repackaging would be if you're taking another product that's already distributed and putting it into your own packaging. So specific questions, please do email us and we will be able to help you that way. Thank you.
Thank you again, Reggie. We have another question for you. If a company has multiple establishments registered under different subsidiaries owned by the same parent company, and they want to migrate these establishment registrations into FDA Direct, do the establishments need to be set up so they all share the same registrant, i.e., parent organization?
Yes, this is a great question because I know there are times when firms have previously unknowingly submitted multiple establishment registrations under multiple set IDs, and now they want to manage all of those establishments under one set ID. Yes, all of those establishments will then need to share the same registrant DUNS, because in the establishment registration, as I showed you, there's only one field for registrant DUNS. And as such, each of those establishments that you now put into the establishment registration have to share the same registrant DUNS. You may run into an error or two because you may get the error that this establishment DUNS is associated with a different registrant ID. Email us and we can help you fix that error in order for you to be able to more easily manage your establishment registrations under one establishment registration, SPL. Thank you.
All right. Thank you again so much for that information. And this concludes the 30 minutes we had scheduled or allotted for Q&A with this session, but please be aware there will be another Q&A at the end of the day. So thank you again to our presenters for all the excellent information and insights. Right now, we'll be taking a lunch break to resume at the scheduled time on the agenda, that is 1 p.m. Eastern Time. So everyone, please enjoy the break.